My name is Dennis Fig. I run the security for World Wrestling, and one of our wrestlers that lives down there is missing.
Okay, what's his name?
Chris Benoit.
It was a particularly brutal and vicious murder. It was something that showed some sign of real rage.
Chris was just this gentle giant.
Nobody expects their friend to kill their family. Like, what?
I can't point my finger at one thing and say, this is what caused my brother-in-law to snap.
People need to understand that that was not him. He was my hero.
I need to talk about this. If you're gonna say I'm glorifying a murder, stop listening now.
It's Saturday night. We're gonna go into Laredo, Texas. You know, the Texas Loop. I get to Laredo, and Chris, myself, and Scott Armstrong are gonna ride together. And then later I get a call from Chris, and he goes, "Oh man, I'm not gonna make it." I go, "What's wrong?" He goes, "Daniel and Nancy have food poisoning, and I'm just trying to take care of them." And I'm like, "Oh man, are you good? You all right?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm okay." I said, "Well, tomorrow we're in Houston for the pay-per-view." So he goes, okay, great. I said, "Okay, man." And he goes, Chavo. I go, "Yeah?" And he goes, "I love you." And I'm like, "Okay, brother, I love you too, man." That was weird. And I go, "Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm okay, man. I'm just really tired." I said, "Okay, man. Okay, well, you can call me if you get any problem." "Okay, well, I will." So then, that's it. About 5:30 in the morning, I get a text, and it was from Chris's phone, and it said, "The dogs are in the enclosed pool area, and the back door is open." So I'm just half asleep, and I see this text, and I'm like, the heck is that? All of a sudden, 30 seconds later, I get another text from Nancy's phone, and it says the exact same thing. I was like, that's weird. I get another text right afterwards, tells me his physical address. What is that? So I disregarded, thinking I'm picking Chris up in 3 hours at the airport. So then, I meet Scott downstairs. We go get breakfast, and I talk to him. I go, "Hey man, did you get a weird text from Chris?" He goes, "Yeah, I did." I said, "What did it say?" And he said the exact same thing. We drive to Corpus Christi for the next show. Still no word from Chris. So the head of talent relations, Johnny Ace, asked me, "Hey, Chavo, have you heard from Chris?" And I said, "No." I said, "But look, Johnny," and I bring out my phone and I show him. "These are the texts that I got from Chris yesterday." And Johnny, in his raspy voice, is like, "Chavo, why didn't you show us these yesterday?" And I'm like, "Look, man, we're covering for Chris. We didn't know where he was. You didn't know where he was."
The office starting to get concerned because it was getting to be like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So Vince McMahon has sent a wellness check to his house.
I was in my patrol car just riding around the county, and was pretty close to the area when the call went out. My name is Larry Alden. I was with Fayette County Sheriff's Office. I was lieutenant in charge of the shift that was working the day of the Benoit incident. I had been a detective for about 15 or 20 years. I'd probably see Chris Benoit once or twice a week at the gym, which was right in the middle of Fayetteville. He didn't talk a lot, and he was pretty focused on getting his workout in. I never heard anything about him. I didn't even know where he lived at until the call came out on the radio that day. I wasn't thinking of anything other than a welfare check, or maybe he was sick, maybe drunk. Didn't really know what. I pulled up on scene about the time the neighbor was walking over, and I walked up to them, and I asked if she had seen Mr. Benoit or anybody. And she said, "It's been 3 or 4 days since I've seen anybody over there." There was 2 large canines in the yard. If I remember correctly, they were German Shepherds. We asked her if there was any place she could put the dogs at so that we could go up there and do the welfare check. And she said, "Oh yeah, me and the dogs get along great. I feed them whenever they're out of town." And she jumped the fence, dogs right there with her. She walked them in there, never had to take hold to them. It was taking a little longer than I thought it should take, but then she came running out the door, screaming that Daniel's dead, Daniel's dead. I went from just being a regular welfare check, okay, we got something more serious here. So this man calls a meeting at the ring.
Dean Malenko's sitting next to me. I just had this really bad feeling. Dean's like, there's something wrong. Something is not right.
That's when Vince McMahon stands up in the ring and says, "We just got word that Chris Benoit, Nancy, and Daniel have all passed away." And the gasps, of course, around the ring.
I remember Vicky because she just let out this hurling scream.
I freaked out and I started crying, and Dean kind of stood up and he grabbed my hand and he took me off to the back.
So then Vince is backstage, and I walk up to Vince and I said, "What happened? What happened?" And I'm a little frantic. And he says, "They're gone." I said, "What do you mean they're gone?" And he hugs me super tight. And my head's on his shoulder, like crying to Vince, like, "No, no, no, like, what happened? I don't understand, I don't understand." Nobody understood because no one knew the details yet.
That's when all of this, all of these details start coming out about it's not just him that's dead, it's Nancy, and then Daniel's dead as well. And then that's when it just started getting out of control.
The father killed his wife and son and then committed suicide. That's what's happened here. You didn't want to believe it. Can't believe it. Can't be true. But it was.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Wrestling with Conspiracies. This is the first one of many to come, and if you haven't figured it out by now, we are going to be speaking about the Chris Benoit conspiracy. There's many different things that can be said about it. I want to start it off by going one by one and just giving our thoughts in general about what we think happened and how much of it we believe and don't believe. And after that, we'll go through and list off some of the conspiracy theories that people have brought up about it. So I'm going to go over to Johnny first and see what he has to say about it.
I mean, yeah, it's an unfortunate tragedy. Some things don't add up. Some things do, especially after the autopsy was done and they did the brain scan, and then based on there was all kinds of drugs in the house, equivalent of a small pharmacy. But like, what doesn't add up is like what we just played in the video there, the text messages that were sent overnight to Chavo and Scott Armstrong, that pretty much detailing what his address was and how to get in the house, because it sounded like they were in distress. But then you've seen the evidence of how they pieced together how he murdered his wife and his son, and took his own life. It was very detailed investigation. But yeah, like I said, there's some things that don't add up to that.
Drew, what are your thoughts on it?
Knowledge me.
It's a lot to take in. I think he had some mental problems. He was dealing with some stuff. Didn't know how to deal with it. Might have been taken, like Johnny said, had a whole pharmacy there. And a couple years before, he lost his best friend, so maybe that played into it too.
Not to mention many other friends over the previous years, and even in the months leading up to that.
Yeah.
Sherry Martel passed away just a week before that from a drug overdose. She was good friends with Nancy.
Right. And
before we continue, Loomsy, thank you for the 4 months, bro. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that have been brought up and debunked about it. Me personally, I I just don't see how a sane, normal person would be able to do something like this to his own wife and kid, even though like him and his wife had their fair share of issues. Him and Nancy went through a lot, and many times they went back and forth on getting divorced. I still don't see a regular person being able to do this, which then comes into the CTE argument that, they did the brain scans and they showed that he did have significant damage to his brain and that he wasn't acting rationally and thinking
Right.
rationally a lot of the time.
His finisher was the diving headbutt, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had the brain of an 80-year-old man with early onset dementia.
And I think he could have had CTE early, and that contributed to it. Could have been steroids contributing to that as well.
Yeah.
And maybe some other drug he had taken.
He was taking testosterone.
So all that mixed up together, he might not have been in his right mind. He probably wasn't.
Yeah, I don't think he was in his right mind, and that's one of the worrying things that a lot of people still worry about to this day with current superstars who do moves along the same line as Chris Benoit used to do. I know one of the ones a lot of people worry about is Brian Danielson. They worry about him a lot because of his history with concussions and him still going out there and doing some of these moves. But yeah, that's always going to be, I think, the main focus whenever anyone brings up Chris Benoit and the tragedy that happened. So to get into some of the conspiracies that have been debunked, there was Kevin Sullivan.
Yes.
Who is Nancy's ex-husband, or they were married, right?
Yes, they were married. They were married in 1992, and to give a little backstory on that, she was his manager in WCW. She went by the name of Woman. She managed other wrestlers. Also, when they left WCW, they went to other places like Smoky Mountain Wrestling and ECW, where she again managed other wrestlers as well as Kevin Sullivan. And but then they went back to WCW in the late '90s, where that's when Kevin became like a player coach type of deal. He was a booker, but he was still wrestling as well.
Yeah.
And that he booked a storyline between him and Chris Benoit, and Nancy was actually Chris's road partner. So they were always they would share hotels, and they would drive in the car together and on the plane together. So it's natural that that two people that spend that much time together are gonna eventually become attracted to each other. And I think Kevin was he was starting to get jealous, and especially after Nancy divorced him. And I don't think Kevin forgot about that. I don't think he got over it.
Yeah, I don't think he got over it either. But one of the things a lot of people would say about Kevin was that when it came to tying him to the Benoit murder suicide, a lot of people said, "Oh, he's a Satanist, he's in a cult, and this and that and whatever."
Yeah. That was just his
That-
main character.
That was just his persona.
Yeah.
So I think that's no, I know for a fact that's where people were confused by him. And I could see why they would think he would have some involvement in it, but he was clear. Like he had an alibi of where he was
Right.
that night.
Does that mean Undertaker's a killer too?
I mean,
He
maybe.
might have, because he's the devil.
Yeah.
Well, put Kane in that respect too.
Yeah. You would have to put Kane in there as well, because how do you think one person could fend off Chris, Nancy, and their son? So yeah, you would need more than one person. But yeah, that's where his story wraps up to me. I know for a fact he had nothing to do with it because it was all an act. And let me go to one of the other ones here, because that's all about Kevin Sullivan still. And you did bring up the Sherry Martel connection.
Yeah. And Bad News Brown had also passed away a couple months before that, which is the guy that got Chris into New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yeah. And just like Zach said in the chat, people couldn't separate nonfiction from fiction. Yeah, that's something that really needs to happen a lot more to be able to separate the fact from the fiction. Yeah, it's clearly in your face what his storyline was and who Kevin Sullivan's character was. So yeah, that completely clears his name. He's got good shit to help him out in that. One of the other things that happened that night, as y'all saw in that opening video, is that he made some calls to Chavo Guerrero, and that some of those calls sounded a little bit weird. That Chris Benoit sounded off.
Yes.
And what's weird to me in those calls, well, not so weird seeing as what happened, is that even though he mentioned Nancy and his son being there, he never heard them. Like, even though they were sick, you would think he would be able to hear something.
Right. Like I was telling Andrew before we went on, that's because he had already killed him. He killed Nancy on the Friday night, and he killed Daniel that Saturday morning. There was a house show that night in Beaumont, and Chris was actually thinking about making that show. He even booked a later flight that day, but I guess he decided not to at the end, and that's when he ended his life.
Yeah. So one of the other things Chavo said during one of his phone calls with Chris is that he heard an intruder over the phone. And this is the one I find the most interesting, because it's one of the ones I hear from almost everybody who knows anything about this Chris Benoit case. I find it weird that neither the police or investigators or anybody who did any sort of work in this case never found his phone to be able to test it or look into it, look through text messages, even though now you can pull up like the file, like you can go to the company.
Yeah, you can hear all the calls that were made.
Yeah.
And you can see all the text messages that were sent out.
Yeah. that one just seems a little bit weird to me. What happened to his phone? That's always going to be a question in everybody's mind. And yeah, just Chavo saying that he heard someone else there, like in Chris Benoit's ear, almost like telling him something to say, telling him what to say.
Yeah. And you know, we always ask these we talked about it before. We ask the questions, "What if?" Because Bob Holly had actually offered to go pay Chris a visit a couple days before the murders, but he decided not to because see, Chris had taken a few days off and he wanted him to have time with his family. Also, that Friday night, Nancy had made 3 calls to the neighbor. Her name is Holly. She was real close with the family. She was Daniel's horseback riding instructor. Uh, she made 3 calls to her home that night, but she never got an answer. So you know, what if Holly had picked up the phone?
Yeah. It's just it's going to be real weird to me that his phone was never found, even though now there's no need to really have it because of how you can pull the information from said company, whatever service he had.
Yeah.
So his phone is really not that important, but that just leads me to ask the question, who has his phone? And what were they trying to hide by taking his phone? Maybe Chris caught some videos or pictures of when the intruder, if there was an intruder, made his way into the house. Because even though the company can pull up phone calls and text messages, pictures and videos, no, you can't pull that up because back then there was no cloud.
Right. Yeah.
There was none of that.
Yeah.
Now,
Now,
you're screwed.
Yeah.
So basically, don't kill anybody now.
Yeah, pretty much. Don't kill anybody now because hey, everything's backed up. Like my phone backs up to the cloud every single day. So
Oh.
any pictures that I add to it are gonna be there.
I have pictures on my phone going back 10 years, and that was like 3 phones ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So be careful with the pictures you take.
Yeah.
Because they will come back to bite you in the
They're
ass.
out there.
Yes.
They're out there.
Yeah.
And if they are that something that can get out, it'll find its way out. So yeah. That's just one of the things I'll always find interesting is we're never gonna know what truly was on this phone as far as pictures and videos from those last couple of days. Zach, yes, this is the problem right here. Mine are NSFW. Well, yes, that's what we do sometimes. So that's what we have to worry about. So let me see what else we got here. One of Benoit's neighbors, Holly, the one you were talking about, she was the first one to call after WWE had contacted the authorities about Benoit's absence and the strange text. One of the things that a lot of people who live in the neighborhood say is that Dave Taylor, who at that time was a WWE talent, was spotted outside the Benoit residence shortly before the police arrived. So that's another question. How can someone from WWE and who back then was just a talent, even no one that was that important, know to be there? You know? That seems suspicious to me.
Was he ever questioned by the police?
As far as I know, and from what I'm reading, he was not. What people said, and one of the things he said is that he heard that the family had been sick and that they had no showed, and that Benoit had no shown some dates. So his alibi is that he was coming to check on them. But I still find it a little
Yes.
suspicious.
Why would you be in Georgia if your company that you work for is in Texas?
Yeah. And from everything I've seen, he wasn't even really someone who was great friends with Chris or Nancy. He was just another talent the company had at the time. So that is something, if I was the police investigating this shit, that is something that I would have questioned him about. And I mean, as far as I know, he's still alive. So there's
Yeah.
still time
Yeah.
that someone can maybe still question him on it. So yeah, that's something they can look into as well, if somebody really wants to. One of the other things was that happened a couple of days before is the Wikipedia entry that foreshadowed Nancy's death. So 12 or so hours before the police discovered the bodies, somebody made a Wikipedia entry that said Chris Benoit was replaced by Johnny Nitro for the ECW Championship match at Vengeance, as Benoit was not there due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife, Nancy. And what made it even more suspicious is that the IP address of the user who made the edit was based in Stamford, Connecticut, which we all know WWE headquarters is in Stamford. Well, yeah.
Well, that could have been someone from WWE just changing the page after they knew Chris wasn't going to be there.
Yeah. And it continues that I had heard. So I think it's been cleared up. Well, it has been cleared up. So police traced the IP address to the home of a local teenager and determined that the incident was most likely a coincidence. But to be able to not only just hours before, and out of all the talent that WWE has, target Chris and Nancy's names on a post where she was already deceased, and that's why he was missing out on Vengeance. That also sounds a bit confusing and misleading to me.
Well, they did say that even by the end of the show, that some of the higher ups already knew the truth of what happened.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if if it somehow slipped out and someone did something they weren't supposed to and they just needed to find someone to pin it on and just found some unsuspecting victim of this random kid and they just blamed it on him. But yeah, the fact that someone put that out on Wikipedia a couple of hours before and getting it right, I think there might have been something else there. And one of the other things people were concerned about that it kind of ties in between the CTE and being a professional wrestler, is that Chris had roid rage, which we all know is a thing. Most people who use steroids are a bit more active, let's say, and sometimes don't have that method of letting out their aggression. So I do believe that that probably had something to do with what happened that night, because you mix roid rage with alcohol use, even though it was shown that there was no alcohol in Chris Benoit's system. I don't know. That's why it's weird to me. There's still a lot of questions that aren't as clear, but finding so many opened wine bottles and beer bottles from what the police report has said, I find it a little bit weird that you don't find some sort of alcohol in
Well,
law.
because they said from the alcoholic level in his body could have dropped from the time that that he passed away to the time the autopsy was done.
Yeah. Yeah. We all know, like, your level of alcoholism can go up and down, and with time passing, yeah, probably by the time they did autopsy and tests and stuff, his levels had gone down. So yeah, it's just roid rage is a bitch. From everything I've read about it and from things I've seen about it, that's not a good thing to have in your body. So, and here we go back to the Chris Benoit had brain damage, with which we've already spoken about, and all the concussions he had, which, Chris Nowinski, who what was a professional wrestler and had his own struggles with CTE, that's why he got into this, did examine Chris Benoit's brain and cleared up that whole thing that he did have CTE. So yeah, we're just never gonna truly know the reason why Chris Benoit did
And
this.
talk about people that may know something. William Regal. He didn't live too far from Chris, and the night after, or that night on Raw when they did that tribute, uh, uh, Regal said, said some nice things about Chris, but then he said he wasn't going to discuss anything further. And it was said that even off camera that JBL went up to him and just said, he just asked him, "You think he did it?"
Yeah. Yeah, that is another the one of the things I had always heard as well, is that William Regal either knew something or had his suspicions about Benoit being able to do something like this, which just goes to show that maybe he wasn't as clean cut of a person as we thought he was. Maybe people saw stuff around happening around the arenas, because back then things were a lot different than what they are now. They wouldn't have cameras rolling 24/7 on the way to the arena, during, in the back and afterwards, capturing stuff for documentaries and for shows that are being recorded, like Total Divas, Total Bellas, that sort of thing. So they probably saw a lot more than we know of.
Well, of course they did.
Yeah. So to be able to know everything is it's not possible, especially from back in the day.
And then there's the irony of this whole thing that Monday's episode of Raw was canceled at the last minute. They were in Corpus for Raw. And Vince opened the show in an empty arena. I'm guessing they told the fans the show was canceled and they probably gave refunds. But he is saying that talking about that how their bodies were discovered and how this is going to be a tribute show and how it was supposed to be a show meant for uh, to find out who killed Mr. McMahon. If you remember a week prior to that, Vince McMahon, he blew up in his limousine, and they had all the wrestlers from Raw, SmackDown, and ECW were going to be there that night, and Stephanie was going to do an investigation and find out who really did it, and I've heard they even went as far as they were going to have a casket on the stage. So all that had to be scrapped.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure like they had some plans, like you said, the casket on stage thing that's one of the normal things you would see back in the day. Not as much now.
Yeah.
Back then you would see that a lot more. Yeah. It's just one of those things that we're never gonna know what truly was gonna happen that day anymore for those plans they had for that episode.
And just to let you know, you won't find that episode anywhere.
No.
That episode is no longer available on the WWE Network. It's not on Peacock. They replaced it with a best of 2007, which is kind of weird seeing a best of 2007 in June. But anyway, that's what they did. So
yeah, to show future matches.
Yeah.
Predictions.
Yeah.
Which one of the other things I saw the other day that I've never seen before is there's this picture where supposedly it's Chris on the day of Nancy's death.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was doing is he had went to a clinic to get medication, air quotes. And it's just one of those pictures where when you see it, he just looks as normal as ever, but it's I'm trying to pull it up here.
Well, yeah, because he had gone to the doctor's office, and after he stepped out of the office, there were other patients there and people and staff that he wanted to get their picture with him. So he took some pictures and signed autographs. The typical stuff that wrestler would do.
Yeah. So as far as we know, from any of the pictures that have made it out, this is the last picture ever taken of Chris Benoit. And this is supposedly at that doctor's office where he went to go get some medication.
See, this could, that could be a sign of road rage roid rage, because maybe he didn't have roid rage at the time.
Yeah. Maybe that's why he looks so calm, normal, collected.
Yeah, like he was medicated almost.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just one of the things we'll never know is what did he really go get there that day. So yeah, like I said, there's still more questions than answers in my eyes. I still think we could be able to dive deeper into it if we knew more details, but there's just so much mystery around it still, even though, all signs point to that Benoit did it. I don't know if we will truly ever know, like, what all was happening that night.
So now the aftermath of Freddie and I were talking about this the other day off there. The house they lived in, the Benoits bought it in I believe '06 or '05 for 900,000. 2 years after the murders, they were sold. It was sold in 2009 for 282,000, considerably less than what it
Damn.
was. Yeah.
700,000, almost 600,000 less.
Yes. So my question, and I had posed this for you. Obviously, the house is going to be worth now more now because of the housing market, and inflation. But uh, the person that bought the home at the time, I don't know, if they still own it, but did they know about the murders when they bought the house? If and if so, or if not, have they heard anything in the house? Are the spirits of Chris Benoit, Nancy, and Daniel still in that house?
Well, this is wrestling with conspiracies. Paranormal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Me personally, with the seriousness of what happened that night, I personally would think there would be some activity
I
in the
would
house.
too, because the trauma and the violence of
Yes.
the murders, it's got to leave an imprint.
Yeah.
And
Of energy somewhere, somehow.
Yeah.
And I would say the main energy would bad energy would be in the basement where that weight room was, because Chris Benoit did hang himself from his pull down machine with a weight of about 240 pounds of pressure that came down on him.
Yeah. Yeah. So as far as I know, from everything I have read, because one of the things, obviously this was very, very short notice and in the moment that we thought of it. From everything I have seen, it's still the same owner.
Okay.
So the same person that bought it still owns it. But I haven't been able to figure out who it is. Obviously.
My question to y'all is, would y'all live there?
Okay.
Being
Be
big
honest,
wrestling
Johnny.
fans, being big wrestling fans, knowing what took place in that house, would you live there?
Yeah, I probably would. I probably would, because even if you did start to hear things or notice things, you could talk to him as a wrestling fan, or even just as a regular person. Just say, what happened. Obviously you're probably not going to get a clear answer, but you know we know you can say, like, what's done is done. I you probably feel bad for it, but you have to leave this house. You can't be here anymore because you're not here anymore.
True. If you had the chance, would you take your wife and kids to live over there?
Oh yeah.
You just wouldn't tell them what house you bought?
I mean, I'm sure the intern would
I
know.
could do my own paranormal investigations.
Yes, get an EMF reader.
Which you can get on your phones now.
Get one of those highway radios that you can they can talk through the spirit box. Yeah.
Yeah. I personally, I'm very much into ghost investigations and stuff like that, I watch it a lot. Like Johnny knows, he's heard it over the last couple of days in my truck that I've been listening to certain things here and there of a new podcast that I found. So yeah, if I had the chance, I would definitely buy the house, and not only would I do my own sort of paranormal investigations there, I would set it up for those that are as interested as I am as a tourist attraction slash like bed and breakfast type of thing. And I would live there and like rent out rooms.
Yes.
Like you wanna spend the night in the garage? Sure.
You want to sleep in Daniel's room?
Yeah, you want to sleep in Daniel's room? Cool. You want to sleep in Chris and Nancy's room? Sure.
You want to go sleep in the basement?
Exactly. Whatever room you want to sleep in, I'll rent it out to you. But yeah, that's just what I would do if I had the chance. And when you asked that question of if we had the chance, would we do it? Zach was straight up. He just said, "Nope. I had my ghost experience, one and done." But then earlier, he said, "Ouija board. We'll find out."
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not messing with that.
Yeah, I know. We've spoken many different times about how far we would be able to take things if we had the chance. And
I would do all the electronic stuff. I'm
Yes.
not touching a Ouija board.
Yes,
no.
yes.
Johnny has straight up said he would want nothing to do with a Ouija board.
I don't know why they sell. I see it at Target sometimes. And I'm like, why do they even sell that?
Don't we carry them at Walmart?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Drew has now said that he would want nothing to do with it.
What's the purpose of that board game anyway?
Don't know what the purpose of it is.
It's made by Milton Bradley.
Yeah. I don't know exactly what it's good for, but I know
communicating with the dead.
For. Yeah, but I don't know what it initially was good for. You know?
Well, I don't know why they made it a family game.
Hey, you want to speak with your dead relatives? Here's a game for you.
I've just heard of too many bad stories that come out of Ouija board use.
Yes, opening stuff that you don't want to open.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, man. For the right amount and with the right level of protection around me,
I'm taking crosses and rosaries and holy
I
water.
would have to have a priest there with like holy water ready, and
yes.
even though I've made it pretty obvious here and in my own personal life that I don't believe in that sort of stuff. If it's gonna save me from,
but you know that spirit probably does.
Yeah. So if it's gonna save me from not being possessed and possibly dying because of it, I'm gonna have someone around that knows what they're doing in that aspect. So yeah, there's a lot that can be done.
Zach just put in the chat, call the Winchesters.
Yeah, call the Winchesters. Yeah, so this is something we're going to be doing. Yeah, Zach. Salt circles and iron. There's so much shit. I'd have so much salt. Like, even though, because you never truly know what can help you out against it. Even though this is a vampire thing, I would have garlic there. Like, maybe the demon hates garlic. Who the fuck knows? But yeah, that's the sort of protection I'm willing to take. So Yeah, this is something we're going to be doing once a month. There's going to be different topics that we're going to talk about,
Both
and
wrestling and non-wrestling.
both wrestling and non-wrestling. I do want to bring up one more thing. Moving away from Chris Benoit for a little bit. Zach, have you heard about Bam Margera and what's going on with him? I know y'all know who Bam Margera is because we've all seen the Jackass movies and we're
Yes.
fans of the show
Yeah.
and stuff like that. He's been going through his fair share of issues these last couple of years, dealing with his best friend's death, Ryan Dunn, and alcoholism and drugs and just trying to cope with everything that has happened. We've wanted him to get better. This is stuff I've spoken to Zach about, stuff I've spoken to Johnny about, and it looked like it was working for a little bit because even Steve-O took him on tour and said, "Hey, if you wanna get started doing this comedy bit thing, this is what I'm doing. It works." Even brought him on stage and they did a couple of nights together and they were finding a good rhythm. But then Bam ended up leaving the tour and just going back to some of his normal ways of drinking and separating himself from his friends. But there were some videos that came out where he was more around his kids. He looked a little bit more clean, a little bit healthier, like he was working on himself. But one of the things that popped up in my email and on my news today before we started is a warrant has been issued for his arrest for assault. He got into an altercation somewhere out in public. All the details haven't been out yet, so I don't know exactly where it happened. But he assaulted someone, got into a bit of an altercation, and as soon as he heard that the cops were on the way, he ran into the woods. And they can't find him.
Oh.
Yeah. So I
okay.
know he did something bad. Like assault is nothing you should do.
Yeah.
Like, you should never assault anyone. So if you do it, I'm always on the belief of you got to face your consequences to your actions. So at this point, I don't know what you do here, or I don't know what kind of condition he's in because he's just hiding out in the woods somewhere and they can't find him. That's just something I wanted to bring up here at the end because I know Zach is a very big fan.
Well,
and like you said, this is part of his childhood.
as bad as it sounds, when somebody does something like that, chances are you're not going to see that person alive again.
Yeah. And I said this before. I'm pretty sure I said this on the podcast at one point. I just want him to get better, and it looks like it's not going to happen because now he's run off into the woods after this assault. So that's just something I wanted to bring up because it's the latest on Bam and what's going on with him. And like I said, we are fans here. So I just thought I'd let you all know. So yeah, sorry that I had to bring that up at the end and kind of end it on a bummer note. But like I said, this is going to be a monthly thing. There's going to be more to come. Let us know if you want anything to hit us with and what you want us to report on.
If you have your own conspiracy theories out there you want us to talk about.
Yeah, we could talk about that as well. We're going to dive into aliens, Area 51, the Yeti, the abominable snowman, all that shit. Whatever y'all want to talk about, we will talk about. So, hope everybody enjoys the rest of their week. And we will come back to y'all on Saturday with our normal news and reviews back to wrestling. So, until then, hope everybody enjoys the rest of their week and see y'all then.
See you next week.
Check you later.